All right, so common question is why 50-50? Well, according to the freezing point, it looks like the lowest freezing point of coolant is achieved when it's 70-30. While the freezing temp is lower, the high concentrate of antifreeze reduces the heat transferability of coolant. Therefore, most vehicles specify 50-50 as the best between the both. So if you use straight coolant, coolant is not good about allowing the heat to be taken out of the coolant. Water is great, but naturally water freezes. So you want to make sure that in the summertime you are not dealing with straight antifreeze. It has to be cut with coolant. Otherwise you may find the car running warmer than it should. Right? So one of the things that happens with a lot of cars is the car has air in the system if you drain it, and you have to get all that air out. If there's air trapped in the system, air turns to steam and will cause an overheat. Also, lack of heat inside the car. So you have to look at service information, and you have to look at what they tell you to do is the proper filling technique. Okay? So you're going to see in the lab, they're going to give you a bucket like this to put coolant back in. Well, what's nice about this bucket is it raises the coolant level higher than the top of the radiator. As a result, you get that push, and you give a place for the air to get out if it wants to get out. It goes through that heebie-jeebie, as I mentioned. This gives it a place for the coolant to back up into instead of going all over the floor. I recommend never putting coolant higher than this little spot down here so you can control. Right? If you have to add more, you add more. But if you end up with a lake like this, well, now you got to deal with that lake when you are totally full. Right now, if you look, you're going to see on a lot of cars, here's the bleeder screw. Here's a bleeder screw. Here's a bleeder screw. This is a bleeder screw. Right? So you have this thing that's threaded in, and here you've got a little screw that's got a very tiny, dainty shaft that goes down the middle, and it has a tapered seat on the bottom. So when it's screwed in, it blocks the flow. As you loosen it up, the air can come out of this little hole here. So the way you do this is when you're filling up a system, you fill it up with as much coolant as you can give it. Again, I need to stress, don't ever take radiator caps off when the car's hot. Right? You can see it even says it on there. If there's pressure in the system, you always feel the hoses for pressure. We talked about it when we were talking about checking coolants. That applies here too. All right, so you fill this tank up. When it doesn't take any more coolant, you crack open this. And you got to be real careful because it's easy to snap off. Don't use a giant ratchet, a socket with a ratchet. Use a very small one, and really don't try to over tighten these things. Once they snap, that's it. You got to replace it. But anyway, so you fill this bottle up, you loosen this, and now the coolant will push up and the bubbles will come out. So you do it until you get a stream of coolant, then you close it off. Now you start the vehicle up, right? The car's running, the car's running, the car's running. You're keeping your yellow tub with a little bit of coolant in it. You're watching the temperature gauge. You have your heat on low. And you're never done filling a cooling system until that car has heat. As this is filling up, you can crack that open again. See if any bubbles come out. If only coolant goes down, close it up. Right? And you can keep doing it. You just want to make sure that car gets heat and all the bubbles come out of that in the process. I recommend highly that you put a rag under this so any coolant that dribbles out gets caught in the rag. You can have coolant that lands on something that you don't want to get wet. You can also have where you got a puddle of coolant in the car that now drips out, a little bit later. So follow this. Now always look at service information no matter what. In my old program, we had a Nissan Altima, and part of the thing was draining and refilling the cooling system. Service information told you to remove this bolt, and when you remove that bolt, all the air squished out of the engine and the thing took coolant and you were done in 5 minutes. If you didn't remove that bolt, then the car overheated because air was trapped in it And then it took you 45 minutes to let the car cool down before you can try this process again. All right, so always check service information on how to fill the system back up. Now, in the lab, you're going to be doing this, but we use a hydrometer to check the freezing point, right? All these ones have a different way of showing it, but you're going to take it, you're going to stick it into the radiator, you're going to draw the coolant into it, and you're going to see where it settles, and that gives you an approximation of where that freezing point is, right? That's called a hydrometer. Now, a lot of times these hydrometers are good for batteries and coolant. Do not use the same one for both. Once you use it for coolant, it stays coolant. Once you use it for a battery, it stays a battery. There's no ethylene glycol in a car battery, and if you enter it in there, you will kill the battery. Right, pressure testing is something you're going to have to do as well. Now, first of all, there are a whole ton of different size radiator caps and all that, and you can see just the amount of different adapters that might be available. But you're gonna have a pump of some kind, and you're gonna pump it up. And now that radiator cap has a value on it. You never go past that point, right? The cooling system never goes higher than that, so you never want to exceed that value, or you'll possibly break something or rupture something. So if it's a 15-pound cap, you want to see this go to 15 pounds and hold it. It should not slide down. If it does, there's a leak someplace. Same thing goes for the cap. We can put an adapter on it, and we can pressure test the cap. Same thing. It should hold to a certain value and then release past that. If you see that it won't hold pressure, the cap is bad, right? It should always go to what it is. When you do this lab, if you get the opportunity to do it, which you might or might not, I'm not sure, you only go to 10 pounds in the lab because they don't want you accidentally burning something up. Now, you have to be aware, once you pressure test that radiator, that whole system is full of pressure now. If you take that radiator, that pressure tester off the radiator, you will get a bath. So this area up here, there's usually a little tie thing, or you can rock this. You take that and very gingerly, you burp the air out of it very slowly until you decrease all of it. Always have a pan under it, because you may spill it in the process, right? Take your time.